everybody.
Hello.
And welcome to the Macabre Podcast Universe. It's a podcast that exists to prove people wrong.
When they say sequels are never better than the originals.
That is true, and we have now delved into another series. We're doing a nice, tight trilogy, and
I've been excited to do this one.
It's been on our docket for a very long time.
Yeah.
And that is a movie. It's Marvel's first hit.
Yeah.
It's a movie called Blade. And with us today, we have a returning guest, someone who we really enjoyed and had to have him back. It's Kutter Callaway. Welcome to the podcast again.
Thank you. I thought for a minute ago, I know it's your normal tagline, but I thought you were talking about me when it came to sequels. Trying to prove that sequels aren't worse than the original. So hopefully the sequel guest spot is...
A lot of pressure on you.
I know. Meets the high demand that we created with our lengthy discussion before.
So Kutter, I sent you a big long list of movies to choose from, and you immediately jumped to Blade, and I always am curious why a guest chooses a movie. So why'd you choose Blade?
Well, really, it's self-motivated because I have a podcast coming out. I'm rebooting my podcast. I've had one for a little while. It's been all over the place. This one will probably be launching. We'll probably have the pilot out sometime during this summer. We're in 2023. And then hopefully early fall, the weekly episodes will start coming out. And the entire first season is going to be on horror. And I have to say that well, because I have a weird accent. So the horror genre. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to hug two birds with one wing, I thought, why not pick the thing that's closest? And we can do some what do you call it? Marketing, cross platform
promotion. Yes.
Cross promotion. Thank you. So I thought that'd be fun, and MCU, and then I can share a little bit about my story of Blade the first time I watched it. But that's the main reason why I picked that of all the ones you gave me.
Okay, great. And I mean, since we're here, and by the time this comes out, we can assume that the world is still here and everyone's still around and your podcast has come out. What is it called so that people can find it?
Well, this is a good question. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it, and then maybe you have to go and post and like beep and like Right now, the working title of the big podcast is Watch This.
Okay.
The season, I think, is going to be called Be Afraid.
Okay.
So a lot of it will be talking about fear and what different kinds of subgenres of horror, what kinds of fears they invoke, that sort of thing. So,
cool.
And then in this case, like vampires, like what kinds of fears are they tapping into that make them appealing to audiences?
Can you tell us any of the movies that you're going to be covering, or is that top secret right now?
Well, it's by the time this comes out, it won't be as secretish, but we're probably going to actually focus on, it'll be driven by the filmmakers and the films they're making, but then we're going to try to compile, basically like you're walking into each episode is a new room of a haunted house.
Yeah.
Okay.
So each room has sort of like a different kind of scare. And so one might be on supernatural horror. Another might be on like body horror. Another one on, sort of that mix of sci-fi, suspense, thriller, plus monsters, Of course, we'll have some zombie horror, that sort of stuff. So those are some of the genres we'll go into. There are a couple of newer films that are coming out this fall. And so that's where I'll tease the audience.
Okay.
Are pretty big films in the horror franchise world. Some sequels and some reboots that'll be pretty fun. So, talking to some on-screen talent, some directors, some writers, some producers, some sound designers.
Nice,
so
that's cool.
Will be fun. So, it should be fun, and actually some psychologists. So,
one of the things this is going to be good.
Just like because there is some good, right? And any entertainment in general, sometimes you ask like, is that good for you?
Right.
But with horror, what is it that we might go is actually healthy psychologically? And then are there sometimes where you're like, yeah, that may not be all that great for you.
Right.
So psychologists as well, helping us talk through some of those things.
Man, I can't wait to listen.
Yeah, that sounds so good.
I'm gonna watch or listen to the episodes with a notepad and just be like, okay, I'm gonna try and contact this person to guest on an episode, and now I'm gonna try and contact this person to guest on an episode.
Yeah, it's been fun. I haven't finally landed one yet, but I think the person, I don't know. I mean, I've gotten yeses or yes, but I can't do it for certain reasons. Is I'm going to interview, or at least hope to interview, an actual working exorcist.
Whoa,
interesting.
Yeah, I know. And so it's funny because, you can talk to people about the movies they've made that might be about exorcisms or super, but I'm actually I'm a little nervous. Like I'm gonna, what are we? Oh, you've actually done this sort of stuff. What's that like? So that's my hope. The first couple are actually now not in the ministry anymore. They're doing other stuff. So apparently they can't do press type things.
Interesting.
They're not actively in it. But I'm tracking them down. I'm gonna get me an exorcist, and it's gonna be great. So
dang,
wow,
that is so interesting.
Well, you got at least 2 listeners headed your way.
Yeah, seriously.
They'll be the
2. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about our first experiences.
Yeah.
I think for me, this is just one of those movies. It came out when I was a little bit too young to, go see an R-rated gore fest.
You would have been 4 years old.
Oh, okay. Even younger than I was expecting.
Yeah. This is 1998?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
We both would have been a little too young.
Both far too young.
I will say, though, that all of the interviews I've done with regular people on the horror podcast, and I ask them 2 questions. 1, what's your earliest memory of being afraid? And then 2, what's the earliest memory you have of being afraid in a movie? And interestingly, they're almost the same question a lot of times. And almost always it's like, I was 5 years old and I was with my cousins, and the cousins pulled out, Poltergeist. And so, who knows?
Sure.
Maybe you had seen Blade at 4.
That's a fair point.
Yeah,
but Micah, I think I can't remember if we've talked about it on the podcast, but when I was a kid, there was this movie that was on TV, and it was this really horrifying thing that was happening, and I got so scared, but I just left the room. My dad was watching it. Went into the other room, just playing some video games, but I was so distraught over this thing that I saw that I came back out and was crying. And I was a child.
Man, yeah.
And it was it got to me. And for years, I could not remember what it was that I saw. I remembered that there was a dog and a lady ironing, and the dog hypnotized her, and then she ironed her baby. And it was I don't remember it showing her ironing her baby. It's she envisioned it happen. Either way, it was terrifying. But for years, it's where did I see that? What happened? And you, Micah, found it. It was The Omen 2.
Oh.
It was Omen 2 or 3.
2 or 3. You found the clip on YouTube, and I was looking at it and watching it. I was you know what? I can't watch this.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm that anxiety and fear's coming back.
The childhood trauma come back to you.
Yeah. So I still have not watched it since then.
But I don't know. It's funny. I was going to say it's funny because my story with Blade is I'm a little older than you guys. So my wife and I used to see, when we were dating, just basically everything. We lived in a town where there was nothing else to do but watch movies. And so we went and saw Blade, and it was actually one of the first. I mean, we didn't read reviews, we didn't do anything. We just watched everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not a great approach. And I believe it was Blade that she finally was like, yeah, no, enough is enough. And it was the basically opening segment. And she's like, I'm out, no more. So she wasn't, I wouldn't say traumatized, but she was that was the moment when she decided her appetite for violence in films was a little less than mine. I could endure a lot, but she walked out, and that was, I think, the first movie I've ever walked out of, because my girlfriend at the time is yeah. So that's my Blade story.
I mean, blood raining from the ceiling doesn't get much more violent than that.
It's true. So now I have to follow up right away. But you did see it again in between then and recording.
Yes.
Okay. Not that would be a problem, but
Yeah, I mean, that would be, what would that be? That'd be 25 years. That would, I would not trust my memory that well. So
yeah. Okay.
That's an interesting first experience, though.
That is very interesting. But yeah, for me, and I mean, I can kind of speak for you at the same time. this is just one of those movies you hear about a lot, and it's kind of like, I think, it's not like an A tier must see movie, but it's certainly in the B, where it's like, okay, once you've knocked out some of the classics, you should definitely watch this movie.
Right.
And so a couple of years ago, we threw it on.
Was it your first time too?
That was my first time as
well.
well.
I don't remember that. Okay.
And I'd heard a lot about the opening scene in the movie.
Okay.
And that was when I think I saw a little footage of it, and I was kind of like, okay, I need to track down this movie right away and watch this. And watched it, and I think I was in a little bit of an uppity mood where I was like, those effects aren't very good, therefore the movie's just okay. And then we rewatched it last night, and I'm like, this movie freaking rules. I really like this movie a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if you had anything to add on yours.
Yeah, I knew this movie existed growing up, but knew nothing pretty much beyond that. I didn't even know it was a Marvel movie until, or, a Marvel thing until you probably told me before watching it. The thing that would get me more than anything is I just love, because it's like monster related things where it's like, oh, what's their version of a vampire? I'll watch it simply for that reason. Like, what's their take on it? So yeah.
And that's something that's like endlessly fascinating, I think, about vampires. And maybe we kind of jump the gun and talk a little bit about that. Because they're so adaptable, and people have so many different versions.
Mm-hmm.
And we just watched Daybreakers a couple months ago, a movie that I thought was pretty bad, but it was so worth watching just because of the concept, where I was like, I'm glad I watched it, even though I don't think the third act really works.
Right.
Yeah, so why is that?
Like, why are we fascinated with vampires?
Yeah, why does it keep on coming back?
The history of vampires is kind of vague and ambiguous. There's a lot. It's interesting. There's a lot of like overlapping stories that kind of merge in various different places. A lot of people think of Bram Stoker's Dracula,
mm-hmm.
The original. But even before then, there were different sort of episodes where you'd get these kind of creatures that had a bloodlust, if you will. So I think the couple things that are sort of scary or tap into like our fears. One, it kind of depends on the origin of the vampire, right? So like, what
mm-hmm.
are they from? Some like technological accident that they're created? Is it from a virus that spreads? That's one thing that happens. Is it from a sort of super secret kind of like religious society or sect? Like each of those, I think, gets at a slightly different kind of core fear. The undead just terrify us, in part because we're grappling with our own mortality. This whole sort of approach to psychology called terror management theory would say that basically all of our human motivations are driven by our fear of death. And that could mean I'm worried that I'm going to die and I don't want to face it. So I like have all this cognitive dissonance that I have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Or like I'm afraid my death is going to go really bad. Like it's going to be super painful. I could be afraid that in light of death, the stuff I'm doing right now is meaningless. So like this idea of being a sort of animated corpse or an eternal figure that never actually dies. And you get a lot of these tropes with vampire movies where they lose all their friends, right? So yeah, imagine you are a person that grows older than all of their friends and siblings and family and relatives, and you might know some people that are quite old and they've just lost all that sort of social circle. That's a really terrifying reality to imagine going on and on and on and on. But at the core of it, though, I think, or not the core, but at the most sort of visceral with Blade. And I think this gets in a lot of the sort of vampire stuff. There's this overtone of kind of like sexual violence.
Yeah.
And I actually thought the most disturbing scene, I didn't remember this, but the most disturbing scene in this Blade is when he has to suck the blood from Karen.
Yeah,
absolutely.
At the end. And it's like almost like a rape scene. It was like the way they filmed
weird.
It was Yeah, I did not like that. It's been a while since I've seen it, and I was like, "Whoa, what's happening there?" And I think that's on purpose, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the interesting thing about the vampire lore is it's like a sexual predator. It's not just after our lifeblood, but There's
Yeah.
something that seems quite sort of violent and intrusive about the character of a vampire that's different than like a zombie or something, right? That's
Right.
just kind of mindless coming after you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think as far as like the original Bram Stoker, from the little part that I read, there's definitely an element of there's like it to me, a lot of times vampires are some sort of metaphor for sex. I'm not the most like equipped person to have those sorts of conversations, but so it's like you're taking like the young pure virgin a lot of times in
Yeah.
these sorts of movies, and that's one of the, even though those movies aren't very good, the story's not very good. It's kind of an interesting element of the Twilight series that like
Yeah.
the idea that these things that are all about sex are all about how you should wait till you get married is like the thing that
Yeah.
Stephanie Meyer wanted
Yeah,
to
yeah.
do. So yeah, I think that's definitely in there. And then there's a weird, almost like Oedipus thing with his mom going on toward the
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
same sequence, and I had forgotten all of that stuff in this movie. It's certainly interesting though.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something just definitely vampires are very intimate.
Yeah.
Especially because
Yeah.
it's like you classically like they're biting the neck. That's the classic way to think of it. And
Yeah.
that's just very close proximity. And then the fact that it's blood, life force. It's just that's like another intimate thing about it that's very strange
Yeah.
and freaky.
Yeah.
And
But-
yes, it's scary. Like it's a threat, right? It's a different
Yeah.
kind
Right.
of threat than just you can kill me or just whatever. It's very close at home.
Yeah. But let's talk a little bit about the making of the movie, and then keep diving back in. This movie's directed by Stephen Norrington, who was a special effects artist on Aliens, and then he works on this movie. He did another like independent movie, which got him this movie, and then he directed League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Oh, okay.
An experience he found so painful and awful that he has not directed a movie since.
No way.
Uh,
And have you said that that's the movie that Alan Moore is like, I'm no longer seeing these movies?
I
on my thing?
believe that is the movie that Alan Moore, the creator of that comic series, along with the artist, saw, and he said, "I am never going to watch something that someone adapts again of mine." I'm
Wow.
pretty sure it's that.
Interesting.
Alan Moore, famous weirdo though. wouldn't take his advice, but definitely read his stories. But yeah, so he had a bad experience, and essentially Sean Connery didn't really act much after that as well. So both of those guys had a terrible experience. I think they clashed together as well as with the studio.
Okay.
I have heard, and I don't know if this is just how people reclaim movies every 20 years or not, but I have heard that there's definitely a contingency of people who like that movie a lot.
You just need to watch it. We've talked about it so many times.
Yeah. Have you seen it, Cutter?
No, and mainly because everyone said it was terrible. So
Right.
I say that I don't think I did. I need to go back and you ever see I'm like watching the movie halfway that I didn't think I ever seen. I'm like, wait a minute, I've seen this before. So
Right.
I'm pretty positive I have not seen it though.
Okay. And then
What's interesting too is Blade was written by David Goyer though. And he wrote things like Dark Knight. And I think Batman Begins or one of the other Christopher Nolan Batmans. So
he was on Rises.
So Batman Begins, Dark Knight, and Dark City, which I never saw. But he's a pretty good writer in terms of like or rethinking the sort of superhero franchise or genre.
Yeah.
Well, and he's interesting because he hears rumblings that they want to make a Blade movie at New Line, and he like runs over there and he immediately pitches them a trilogy of movies.
Wow.
And he'd had a little bit of success. The movie he had come out with before then was Dark City, which recently watched. It's a really good movie. Would definitely recommend. And I know you're a Matrix fan, and it's kind of in that same vein of movies. So
that's the one we watched with my dad.
Yeah.
I thought that with Blade too. I thought rewatching Blade, it reminded me so much of Matrix. The set pieces, the music, the sort of nightclub,
totally
house music and stuff. So there was a lot of, except the effects were like, it's interesting. Just one more year later, the effects were so much better.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought was interesting with the Wachowskis of like, they did a lot of technological innovation in addition to storytelling. But I do still think it's like when we watch Terminator 2, I don't know if you remember ever watching that, but man, when that thing came out, I remember watching that movie and saying, it will never get better than this. There will not be better.
Yeah.
This is it. It's as good as it gets. And now I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's awful. Like, what is, you know? So we need to remember 1998. You were 4. We thought it was amazing.
Right.
I think about that, like when I saw the new Avatar movie, I thought to myself, like, this is actually like impossible to get further. But I'd recently rewatched Avatar 1, and just the jump from 1 to 2, I know it's been a lot of years,
Yeah.
was like insane.
Yeah.
How much better looking 2 looked than 1, and 1 already looks better than all other special effects movies. Like,
Yeah.
as far as realism
And I
goes.
feel like if they redid Blade, they could just go back and do it like a small little edit. There's only like 3 or 4 times where I'm
Yeah.
like, oh.
For me, it's
And I
really
bet
the last part of the movie where it's like, oh, this really rips me out of the moment.
Yeah, the CG
Yeah.
blood is not super great.
And the like skeleton bats flying around. Like,
Yeah.
I like what they're doing. I just,
Yeah,
yikes. Yeah.
Agreed.
But yeah, so this is Goyer's first like comic hit.
Awesome.
Like he'd done some work on like the Crow sequel, which is also comic books, but I mean that's the sequel, and I don't think anyone ever talks about or has seen the sequel to that movie. So this is his first big one, and this is also Marvel's first big movie because the movie they'd released prior to this was called Howard the Duck, which did not do so well.
Yeah.
So it is really funny because I remember.
So they made that, assuming that's like for kids. I mean, I've never seen the movie and I've never read Howard the Duck, but the first comic book movie they're going to choose to make is that one, which I feel like might be more in line for kids. And then they do a hard left and they're like, let's do an R.
Yeah, I think so.
That's interesting.
And I do remember it was pretty funny though. When Black Panther was coming out,
Yeah.
you know, there was a lot of talk about like this is the first like black superhero.
Yeah.
And all of these people were like, "Are you joking? The first successful Marvel movie before even Spider-Man or X-Men was a black superhero."
Yeah.
Now Black Panther was even more successful and the first MCU.
Yeah.
But Wesley Snipes has got the title. You
Yep.
got to give it up for the Snipes man. But yeah, I just wanted to say as well that according to Steven Dorff, who is the bad guy in this movie, Norrington has just been making a movie with miniatures in his house for the past few years. And says
Prior to this?
No. This was in 2018. He said this.
Oh.
And he's probably it might take like a decade more for him to finish the movie.
He's making his mad
God, yeah.
Dog.
But yeah, I guess. And the other thing he said is he said he cares more about his art and making something he wants to make, which is pretty admirable because a lot of people just take the money and do what they're told. So it's kind of cool that he's willing to just stay out of it for 20 years, just make his own thing.
And I sorry, I was doing just a little background research the last 2 minutes, and because Howard the Duck, I said, oh wait, Howard the Duck's important. And it failed and flopped. You know what happened because of that? So it was George Lucas's like lights, arts, magic, or whatever did Howard the Duck. It bombs, and in anticipation of having to pay for it, Lucas sells his graphics department, and Steve Jobs buys it and names it Pixar. So Pixar emerges in part because of failure of the first Marvel movie, Howard the Duck. We would not have Pixar if it wasn't for that. So
I did not know that.
Yeah, in addition to Blade, that's how all that worked out.
Whoa.
Well, let's wrap up the podcast. Doesn't get better than that. That's crazy. Yeah, I had never heard that. I knew George Lucas was involved somehow.
With Howard the Duck.
But I've never seen it, and I've never bothered to spend any time on it.
I've seen a clip of it, and it was very funny, but I don't think that was the intent.
No. It was laugh at funny, not laugh with funny.
Yeah.
Well, We should watch it sometime.
Yeah, we should.
I want to watch it. The cinematography is by Theo van de Sande, who is a Dutch cinematographer and done a lot of Dutch movies, but he's also done Little Nicky and Grown Ups 1 and 2.
Okay.
The music is by Mark Isham, who did Point Break and October Sky. Love the score of this movie. Love all the music. Yeah. Movie comes out August.
Well, we've talked about because you and I don't listen to like this kind of music, like the house or the trap music.
Yeah.
But it's just so funny whenever it's in the context of a movie like this, which includes like Matrix.
Yeah.
And like in John Wick, they have stuff like this too. It's like, oh, I love this. This is like the best music ever. But it's when it's contextual, it's like, oh yeah, this is great.
Seeing
all CD underground behavior happens with that soundtrack. That's
very much so.
And particularly seeing Keanu Reeves in a club is a its own thing where I'm always
that's
like,
a genre.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, you're gonna be taken into the Matrix now, or you're gonna kill everyone in this club and fall off of several things. I'm glad I paid money to see this.
Yeah.
Yeah, movie comes out August 12th, 1998 on a $45 million budget. It makes 70 here in the US and 131 worldwide. That's a success, especially for an R-rated horror. But this was back in the 90s when they weren't scared to make R-rated movies for adults. So it's fine.
Well, and it was, I mean, I know it's Marvel, but it was not, I mean, I don't remember, I mean, you know, the MCU didn't exist as it does today.
Yeah.
So my memory of it coming out had no reference to anything else. This was not a part of any universe.
Yeah.
It was just Blade. That was it. And maybe you knew he was a Marvel superhero, but it didn't matter. And it was not really even referenced. So that's the interesting thing now. Like, was there, I think Deadpool, right? Is I was trying to think of any other R-rated Marvel movie because they have to be capped at PG-13, I feel like, for the audience that they need.
Well, you got the two Deadpools and then Logan.
Logan, that's right. But it's not. Movies. Is Logan technically part of the MCU?
No, right?
No, I don't know.
No. Those are both the Fox X-Men movies. So the MCU has yet to make the R dive.
But but they are because of them acquiring Fox.
Yeah, Deadpool 3
will be MCU.
Yeah,
and R.
They're looping them back.
Yeah,
looping them back in. So
and they are making Blade, and I hope I don't think they should shoot. I don't think comic book movies should necessarily shoot for R, as like the main end all be all. But if it's this tone, I'm gonna be very happy with the movie.
Yeah.
Well, my daughters, they are fascinated with what is and is not rated R, and they watched Mamma Mia recently. That's PG-13, and they couldn't figure out why it was rated PG-13. So they're looking up the parental guides, and it says there's like some intense emotional moments of people crying. And so but then they're watching the basketball game with me last night, and Strays comes on. It's like a dog movie, but it's
that's right.
But, you know, and it's like a hard R, but they couldn't figure it out. My 7-year-old's like, no, Dad, it's about puppies. It's like they go on a journey together. And I'm like, but no, it's an R. It's
you're not seeing the Red Band trailer.
Yes, exactly. So you know, what may or may not count for Blade, it might have gotten a PG-13 in today's world. Take a few F-bombs out, and I think you could potentially get that PG-13. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's true. Because I don't know if the blood raining, since it's not gushing out of people, you might be okay.
Well, I would be curious about that because this movie is pretty sexual, and it's very sexualizing. And I wonder if this came. Well, I guess we are going to get a Blade movie, but like this movie came out, and it's like, what would the MCU change in that way to make it fit their parameters if that's what they wanted was a PG-13?
Well, and I think the biggest thing that they would change now, and one of the biggest things I appreciated about this movie, and this is talking more about the plot, is the way they dole out the information and build the world is so they just show us, they don't tell us.
Yep.
And you know, the scene where like Chris Christopherson is like, hey, you know, I think you need more, and he goes to the serum guy, and the serum guy doesn't go on about the different strains of this or that,
All
and like
Blade says is like, I think I'm building up a tolerance, and the guy's like, yeah, thought that would happen.
30-second scene.
That's it.
That's a 2.5-minute scene in MCU.
Yeah.
And it's like building the world, and it'll make a reference to Captain America probably because his serum's in everything.
Yeah.
I think that would be one of the biggest changes. Is that I think the next movie will be more lore heavy, but less like vampire lore and more the MCU lore.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of sometimes a trap they get stuck in.
Yeah, I just hope they can marry the fantasy and the science stuff, because I feel like a lot of the times my issues with some MCU movies is when they go too science heavy, and it's like none of it matters.
Yeah.
You're just making up words.
Yeah.
So I hope they can bridge it well. Like I feel like they do it well in Black Panther.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So they can
do it.
And this one, it could be, you could risk too much origin story type stuff, for Blade or not. And that's like when it just cuts right to the chase. Here he is. He's operating already.
Yeah.
He's a known entity in the underworld, and the backstory reveals itself. But that's kind of the whole, the plot is, I thought I was avenging my mom. It turns out she's one of them. This dude's the guy that I wanted to kill, right? He's sort of my vampire dad.
Right.
In that sense. So it would be interesting to see if they try to reboot that, because that's actually pretty faithful to the original sort of Marvel story. Even in the character names and stuff. So I don't know if they'll need to or try to change to try to incorporate all those other storylines in it.
Interesting. Yeah, it'll be quite interesting to see what they do. One thing that's interesting, speaking of the comics here, so the character premieres in 1973, and he's made by Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan.
The guy's last name is Wolfman, and he doesn't do werewolf?
He does actually work on...
Oh, he does.
That what was the Marvel one shot they did last year?
Oh, it was so cool, whatever it was called.
Yeah, Night of the Werewolf or something like that. He created that character.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, thank goodness.
What it's called? I gotta Google it while you go. Go ahead.
Werewolves Within? Was that what it's called?
I don't think so. I don't remember werewolf being in the title.
Yeah. Well, cut me off when you get to it. Marv Wolf. So they made it. He premiered in the Tomb of Dracula, and he was originally
Werewolf by Night. Werewolf by Night.
Okay. Werewolf by Night. Yes.
Okay. Cool.
A classic place for a werewolf to be. Night. And the character was originally not a daywalker, but was a human that was immune to being a vampire.
Oh.
And of course, this happens all the time with their characters. They slowly evolve over the course of 60 years. But what was interesting was David S. Goyer added the samurai sword.
Oh, interesting.
In the comics, he had daggers up to that point.
Okay.
And then Marvel Comics was like, "Yep, he's got a samurai sword now." So it's always interesting when someone makes an adaptation and then the original source goes, "Okay, that's cooler. That's now Blade's thing. He's got a big blade." It's right there in the title. I don't know why he didn't have it from the get-go.
Yeah, it would be, if it was daggers, it would be called blades, right?
Right.
That's more than...
Yeah, and one of Goyer's big things is he wanted to get away from the romantic, gothic part of vampires a little bit, and steer away from Interview with the Vampire and Rice stuff, and do something that he described as more realistic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not realistic, but I get what he's saying.
No, that's cool. Even when they get into the end of the movie and they're getting into the lore, and the bad guy's doing his thing, that even feels different than it's not goth. It's still not gothic, even though they're going that route with it.
Totally.
That's cool.
And then basically, Wesley Snipes was trying to get a Black Panther movie made for a long time. It doesn't go into production, and he's like, "Okay, I'll do Blade. Let's do this." The movie starts going. They shoot it. They have a Stan Lee cameo, but it was cut.
What?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Oh.
And then Goyer fought for Colan and Wolfman to get credit on the movie. And then Wolfman's representatives pushed back on Colin getting a credit, and Goyer was like, "You didn't even have a credit to begin with, and you guys both created this character. You both should get the credit."
What?
And that's what I got for Blade.
That's very interesting.
I know. But then Marv Wolfman did sue Marvel because he didn't get paid for this movie.
Oh, interesting.
Which there's a whole, I mean, that's a podcast in its own on Marvel writers and how they get paid
and how they don't get paid.
Yeah. And he lost a lawsuit. So,
dang, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of bad.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Just to to touch on a couple of the actors. So, of course, Wesley Snipes plays Blade. He's also in New Jack City, Demolition Man, White Men Can't Jump, which I just saw they're like remaking that.
Really?
And then
already made, it's out.
Oh, it's already made and it's out. That's what I saw today.
Oh. Is it? I'm assuming it came out with like a massive thud. If
Yeah, and it was like straight to streaming, and I don't think it's getting really great reviews.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And then most recently, something he's been in is Marvel's Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. He does some voice stuff in that.
Oh, okay.
Whoops.
Did he cameo in What We Do in the Shadows? I can't recall.
He did. Yeah.
Very cool.
So funny. The show, though, right? Or the movie?
Yeah, it
show.
was the finale of season 1.
That's right.
Where they had like everyone who's ever been a vampire in a movie.
My gosh, that was so good. And then Stephen Dorff, who plays Deacon Frost. He's also in Immortals, Somewhere, World Trade Center, Divinity, and much more. Chris Christopherson, who plays, his character's name is Whistler, but which I can't remember them saying that.
They said it a lot.
Okay,
yeah.
That's just a new thing. He is in A Star Is Born, the 1976 one.
Right.
Oh, no.
He's also in Payback, Forever Young, and Mr. In Between.
Is he Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore?
Whoops.
Isn't he that guy?
Yes.
Okay.
He's also in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
I just needed to know that for my own sanity.
Yeah. And then Karen is played by Anne Bush Wright. I'm probably pronouncing the first name wrong. She's also in Dead Presidents, Zebrahead, Fresh, God's Forgotten House, and a lot more things. Trying to see. And then I'll do Donald Logue, who plays Quinn.
Yeah. I think it's Loge.
Loge. Okay. He is in so many things.
Yeah.
The Patriot, Zodiac, The Tao of Steve, The Equalizer, Dormouse, Law and Order. And then just to end it on Udo Kier, who plays Dragonetti, who's the guy that we will see in things, and for some reason always think he's in Ark of the Covenant.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Raiders of the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it's never him. That doesn't make sense. But he's in things like Downsizing, so we probably thought about it when we saw
I'm
that
sure
movie.
in that movie I said the same thing. Is that the guy?
Swan Song, Hunters.
And he is the Hot Fuzz guy, right?
Let me double check. Who in Hot Fuzz?
I think like the priest of the...
he's not in Hot Fuzz.
I think there's another guy then.
Oh.
Or maybe that guy is the Raiders. I don't know. We can't relegate our audience.
Now that you say Raiders, I'm going to look it up because you're right. He does look like the Raiders.
That is played by...
it blows my mind.
Paul Freeman, I think. This guy. Right?
The Raiders?
Yeah.
person?
Oh, yeah. That's the Raiders of the Lost Ark guy.
I think they both have like piercing
and that
blue
is the
eyes.
guy in Hot Fuzz. So he's in... Okay.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. They just have that piercing blue eye. Yes.
Interesting.
Okay. Well, thank you for that clarification, Jordan. So we've set the table. Do we have anything to say before we start kind of going through the movie?
Let's do it.
Okay. So the movie begins and it goes to... It's in 1967. A pregnant woman rushed into the hospital and she dies on the hospital floor and gives birth to a baby. It's like 1 minute long.
And she's been injured. She's clearly her neck is injured.
But again,
some way.
I fear like you said, Cutter, that maybe the next movie, this will be the first hour of the movie. Like establishing this while he's like punching up, like a punching bag and like training. And it'll be just a slow montage of his mom getting attacked and everything. And it'll be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Who knows though? I think if they're smart, they'll just start it. But then it goes straight into the Matrix 90s club scene.
I really like how they do this where they it's this guy and this girl seemingly on a date. She's taking him to some like secret location. We find out, she's a vampire. This is a vampire rave. I just like that it's from the perspective of this dude that just is like, I'm here to party. I'm here to get lucky.
Yeah.
And we're like, he's slowly starting to get like freaked out by what he's seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then blood starts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's cool. It's crazy. If you're watching the movie the second time through, you're thinking and feeling so bad for all the actors in the scene.
Yeah.
And then freaking Wesley Snipes comes in and starts killing everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, I mean, I think you'd have to make it a pretty good argument as one of the best introductions to a superhero.
I don't know how they're going to top it in the new movie.
Yeah. Because this whole movie, he just knows how to stand and how to make, like, let the camera look at him in a way that it is like he is ripped from a comic book panel.
Mm-hmm.
One of the greatest comic book performances I think I've ever seen. I mean, the guy just embodies it. And all the physicality and the fact that he'll like do a punch and hold and punch and hold. And
yeah, he does that like the whole time.
He just knows what to do.
Scrape his sword along and then just sort of like turn his hand. Like, why did he twist his hand like that? Well, just to flex his muscle. I think the whole first, or it's pretty soon after that, where he goes to get his shot. Maybe it's a couple scenes later, and he's in the chair. And apparently it's really painful. It's in the neck. And I was like, I think that's the main and only scene where he's mostly shirtless. And I think he's like, just like, they're like, oh, just flex all of your muscles as much as you can.
Definitely.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. He just has these great smirks throughout the whole movie. And the sequence, I mean, this is the thing we run up against the show all the time, covering action movies. You have to kind of see it.
Yeah.
But holy cow, it's unbelievably cool.
I still like, it is like we've talked about dated in effects ways, but I like how the vampires like disintegrate when they've been impaled with a silver thing.
Now, one thing I couldn't figure out was why is it Donald or Donald?
I think it's Donald.
Donald Loge. Why he...
Donald.
Sorry. Okay, I couldn't figure out why he could regenerate and others could not.
Well, he wasn't ever stabbed in the heart, right?
But when he like nails him to the wall, and he says, "Let me try it with fire this time." So there's an implication that he's tried to kill him several times.
Could he be pure? We don't know.
I thought he was just torturing him, basically.
Oh.
That's what I was thinking. Or maybe he wanted him to go back and send a message or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when he's giving her instructions and he's like, here's the thing, shoot him in the heart or the head. Otherwise, you'll waste all your bullets.
Uh-huh.
So I think his stuff was all not heart or head shots. And so you'll regenerate eventually. Because it took him a while for the fire skin, for his skin to come back.
Right.
And then the arms too. So yeah, I think that must be it. That must be why.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
The funny thing about that though is later on, that guy is taken to the hospital. He's a burn victim. He's a corpse.
Yeah.
And they're like studying him and stuff. And then he comes back to life and then starts biting people. And it's like, I don't think Blade intended him to like harm more people. But I don't know. Because I do think it was he wasn't trying to kill him.
The only reason he got away, that's because the cops came, right? So maybe he was in the middle of...
Sure, that's probably it.
Actually, I think what he was doing was looking for Frost, and that's his number one guy. And so he was going there, and he probably pinned him up. He wanted to get some information, and then the human, the guy that started on the date, shows up, stops him, and then that's
Yeah.
when all the cops show up, and he has to do his Batman escape type of
Right.
thing. So
Right. That's it.
so I'm guessing that was not his plan. I guess I'm betting his guess was no. I'm guessing his plan, can't get it out, was to interrogate him, and it didn't
Yeah.
go. It didn't go right.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There we
no,
go.
that tracks. That tracks. You fixed it. There we go. We're good. You fixed us
Plot
actually
hole
because
fix.
that's all
Plot hole
in there.
fix.
Yeah. So then in the morgue, he comes to life. The effects on him are fantastic.
Yeah, I thought the makeup and stuff.
It's truly
Yeah.
gross.
Yeah.
I don't like looking at it, but it's in that way of like cover my face and open a triangle on one of my eyes so I can see.
I like in this scene too where it is a lot of just implications of things where we're introduced to Karen where she's like studying the blood, which it seems to be strange, not normal human blood reaction to things.
Yeah.
And her and this guy are like, they have a history together and he wants to talk to her about like there's just like such real life things are happening, mundane things.
Yeah.
And I like that that's kind of like the backdrop to like, and then this vampire comes back to life and starts killing him, and it's like their relationship does not matter.
Right. Yeah.
I liked that touch.
It's a good. I mean, the script it's very economical.
Yeah.
It's great. But yeah. So then Karen, is that the character's name? She gets bit, and then we get introduced to Blade takes her after a daring escape. And is able to show off his superhuman powers by like throwing her over like the New York skyline onto trash bags or something.
All she gets is a dislocated shoulder.
Yeah, that's it. Lucky her.
And then he jumps the distance.
And
So
he like smirks when he does it too.
I know. It's so great. And so then they go back to like their hideout. And this is where we meet Whistler, played by Chris Christopherson.
Yep.
And he's a human, but he's just a vampire hunter. And for any Comedy Bang Bang fans that are listening, I think that maybe Andy Daly's character, Dalton Wilcox, is loosely based on this guy because he sounds just like him and said many sentences that he has said on Comedy Bang Bang.
Like him.
So that was pretty fun to see this time around.
Yeah.
And he says, you should have killed this girl because she's going to turn. And then instead of it being this long emotional thing, they just cut right to the chase, like the serum thing that we talked about. And he just says, yeah, I know, but I didn't. And that's it. And it's like, okay, I get it. I understand this character
but
already.
don't they inject her with garlic to try and like there's a chance that they can stop it if it's not too late.
Yeah. And this, again, like you're talking about how the MCU and really superhero movies in general can sometimes get really in the weeds on the science fiction stuff when really they're kind of all fantasies. It's more what I think. And this movie is like perfectly skirts the line where it's like injection with garlic makes sense to me. That's cool. And it also feels sci-fi and interesting and fun, but it also doesn't really make sense, but also it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's how like all the stuff in this movie is.
I like oh, go ahead.
I was just say they get to what doesn't work really quick. It's like crosses don't work. This doesn't work. That doesn't work. But garlic works, and light and silver. Those are the things that work.
That's what works. We know that.
Yeah, we just go okay. As the audience, like, all right, that's the rules. So there you go.
And I do. So kind of throughout this movie too, we learned like, well, pretty soon after this, we learned there's like a council of vampires that are like pure blood, which they were like born into it, which I kind of wish I actually had more information on that. Like, I guess vampires can procreate in some way, maybe. But then, because they're talking about to Deacon Frost, and he's like a dirty vampire because he was turned into one, and it's like there's some interesting lore there. So then, all to say is I like when they're like injecting Karen with garlic. It's very like garlic is bad for vampires. We're going to stop this infection that's inside of you. So basically, Deacon, like, is an infected person when these guys are like, I am pure and true. It's an interesting both sides of it.
One thing that Goyer thought was interesting and wanted to showcase, and I think he really does, is this idea of there's a group of people and you're an outsider, okay?
Mhm.
You know, that's a common theme, but it's like Deacon's an outsider on the council. And then he included this in his description because it is pretty it's actually kind of insane that in the 90s that like a black superhero lead movie would happen.
Yeah.
For considering that it took until 2018 for it to happen a second time, which it shouldn't have. But anyway, I digress. And so Goyer is talking about how it's like we have a black man, and it's like he's already an outsider, and then he's also outside the vampires and the humans.
Mhm.
So it's like he does not belong anywhere.
Mhm.
And so I do think they hit those themes in a subtle and good way in this movie.
Yeah.
And I did forget to mention that the studio did say at one point they asked if they could have a white actor do it.
Really?
And
Wow.
Goyer was like, absolutely not. You can't do that. Geez, that's so crazy. It's moments like those you just get a little sad.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like Tom Cruise played a Japanese warrior once. There's,
That's true. Yeah.
Christian Bale played Moses. You know, like there's that.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like I agree with you, it's totally crazy. But at the same time, there's been plenty of folks who white guys have played anybody and everybody. So
yeah, that is very true. And speaking of Moses, I recently watched the 10 Commandments for the first time, and you know, that was once again Charlton Heston.
Yeah.
Playing the Egyptian guy.
I don't know if you saw, I mean, Richard Dreyfuss was just interviewed recently about something. He was just going off about Hollywood's like diversity writers and things. And one of the things he specifically said, he's like, "You're telling me that a white man could never play a black character ever again?" And you know, and he's like saying how ridiculous this is, and I'm like, "Are you really gonna die on that hill, Richard?"
Oh man, yeah.
It's a little tone deaf and just wrong. But
yeah.
Anyway, so he was trying to list the great performances of white men playing black men, and that they should be able to do it. And we're just like, man, that's so I'm with you. It's interesting that they got it through. The other thing is, because of the studio thing, they'll often say the reason it has nothing to do with anything but the bottom line. That tickets, like we just can't sell a movie with a minority lead. And now, especially since, let's see, Parasite won, I think it was that year. Was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago? It actually is just patently false. So like major movies with diverse characters, whether it's women or people of color, actually are huge box office successes. So they actually can't draw on that. And maybe in the mid 90s, they might have been able to more consistently. So it's even more of a kind of outlier that he would have been able to lead this film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is a very good point. And also continuing on that point, just for, you know, I do think though, as being critical on movies and stuff, when you're watching an old movie, you should still be able to enjoy the movie to a certain extent. So like I watched the 10 Commandments, and I think there's a type of person now that gets mad on Twitter and would just be like, this movie should be deleted from every archive. And you know what? It is still a really good movie.
Yeah.
But if it was made today, it should be made differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I agree.
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Still study old movies. But yeah, so okay, the Resistance, we talked about that. The Resistance, I mean, the serum building up a resistance.
Force Awakens again.
I'm like, wait, we're back in our Star Wars. No,
we hit a portal. Chris Christopherson tells Karen, buy yourself a gun, and if you start turning, turn it on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, old man working on steel and stuff in the background saying a line like that. Good movie.
Yeah. That kind of feels like a classic like vampire and or zombie trope advice that's always given, and it's like you always got to like tick that box.
Totally.
I love it.
So then she heads to her apartment, and this detail I love. She's worried. She sees these people with matching tattoos, but she's like, it's daytime outside. She goes to her apartment. She's freaked out. And this cop comes in and he says, hey, you were a missing person. You were attacked. I'm just checking in on you. And she's thinking, okay, it's a vampire. Sprays him with garlic. And he starts laughing. And he's like, garlic doesn't work. And she says, they said it would work. And then Blade comes in. And he goes, he's a familiar. And you're like, oh, okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Like, oh, man. And then she gets mad because he used her as bait.
Yeah.
And he responds and says, get over it.
Yep, quite simply.
By the way, we have not watched the sequels yet. I've never seen them before. Are we in for a good ride on the next couple?
I think so. I actually haven't seen the third one,
Okay.
and it's been quite a while since I've seen the second. Yes, I mean they're both worthwhile. I can't remember, which is probably good because I don't want to set you up or poison the well. I don't want to inflate your expectations or not. So I'll just remain neutral at this point and let it go from there. So
okay. What a couple of things I noted is that there are so many newspapers in the city. They're just flying around all over the place in every shot.
As a prop.
Yeah. It's almost like Tim Burton's Batman.
I kept meaning, but like, what city are we in? Are we in an actual city or?
I assumed New York, but I guess they never tell us. They just tell us it's now.
They show like a skyline at one point, and I didn't recognize it as New York.
I assumed because of Marvel that it was New York.
Yeah, I did too. They had one skyline shot, and it didn't look like anything that was clearly New York. So I'll look it up. We'll see.
Okay. And then another thing I noted is that Deacon Frost makes Kurt Cobain look like Mickey Mouse.
What do you mean by that?
He is as emo and as grunge as it gets in this movie.
Okay.
And you know what? I remember not really digging him the first time we watched the movie.
I felt the same way, and I was fine with it this time.
I thought he was awesome in this.
Yeah. I think I was a little annoyed with him in the last act, was my memory. Yeah, like he switched and was just a little like, okay. But he was fine.
He totally worked for me.
Yeah.
You have any thoughts on Steven Dorff in this movie?
Well, I mean, yeah, I remember when I originally saw it thinking he was a little cheesy.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. This time I was like, oh, I mean, maybe because, again, it's all expectations. He's like, meh. But I'm like, actually, he did okay. I mean, like for the character he was supposed to play, like I think he's supposed to annoy us, kind of like he annoyed the True Bloods or whatever they were called.
Right.
So you're kind of supposed to be like, oh man, you are lame. Like, what are you doing? So
right.
I thought he did well with the whole thing. So
yeah. So something in this movie so it is such economical storytelling, which I love, because it's hard to watch a Marvel movie today and not compare it to what we have now because we've gone through so many.
Yeah.
Something that I would have liked a little bit more of is this relationship between these like purebloods and everyone else, and how they've somehow maintained as a place in society where they can blend in with humans and like normal population, and they seem to control world commerce in some way and other things.
Well, they have a treaty with humans.
They have a treaty. And I think I would have liked a little bit more to understand that relationship, maybe so that I could feel a little bit more tension other than Deacon just kind of felt like a kid that didn't want to follow the rules.
Sure.
But I know that a big part of it was because they were telling him he was wrong and he was an outsider.
I see what you mean, yeah.
He just kind of, that relationship seemed a little just like he's a kid.
Right.
Thing.
Yeah. No. I see what you mean. I think for me, I think the movie does enough.
Yeah.
On a personal level, but I do kind of hope that maybe the second one or the third one maybe has a little more council stuff in it, and expands it.
Yeah.
Because it is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have word on the city?
So some people like you have been assuming it was New York, but according to Wikipedia, the club anyway that he raids is in downtown LA.
Oh.
Again, I need to go back and watch the one or two scenes I remember of them showing a skyline. But this is the late '90s skyline of LA, which would be a little bit different than right now. But I still, it didn't. It makes me wonder where it was shot. But supposedly it took place in Los Angeles,
Wow.
which I can attest has lots of blowing newspapers.
Yeah.
So it's
it
just
does
accurate.
seem, now that you mention it, it does seem more LA than it does New York. Okay.
Just assumed it's New York.
Yeah. Okay, so then there is a vampire Bible,
Yeah.
to which I say, cool. And it is in huge, like, Dead Sea Scroll, like, sections in this museum area.
Uh-huh.
And
Like a vampire library.
a vampire library. And is that when they have a fight there, or do they talk to Pearl, the record keeper, first?
I think they talked to the record keeper first.
And record keeper, cool.
Yeah.
Really gross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do not remember that character.
I did not remember that either.
Yeah.
Oh.
Nuts.
I think because they'd shot 7 by now, right? That had come out.
The movie Seven?
Seven's like 95 or something like that.
Okay, so they just took like the mannequin or whatever, and they just put it in there and then added a couple of pounds for the gluttony. Both are things that are hard for me to look at, but I like it in this one. And she's like, what is she? She's shining the UV light on him.
Yeah, she's burning it. And
Oh, it's brutal.
I can't. What I'm curious about is, was the vampire like that as a human, and like, or are they so gluttonous as a vampire they got this way? That's what I'm interested about. But I'd have to read the comic book to find out, I'm sure.
Yeah,
That's
that is.
I didn't think about that.
It's one of those fun, unexplainable things. There just is this bizarro character.
Yeah, and I love that they don't explain it though. Like I don't need a backstory for everybody, but
I would have liked to have seen him turn into a bat, though, for sure.
It'd have been more like a pterodactyl or something. Like
yeah.
giant something.
Then they have a big fight in the library.
Yeah.
And then that leads them to the subway. I know I'm kind of breezing through these scenes, but
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
It's fast paced. I think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love that the Karen character is along for the ride and like chooses to be so, is like, well, I am now a part of this world, so I'm just coming with you for it the whole time. I think that, you know, they use her character well. She in a lot of ways she's the audience.
Yeah.
She's getting a lot of the exposition and explanations of things, of what's happening. But I like that she's continuing to be like sticking by his side to figure out what, like, to try and help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so this is a question I had. I think, you know, I'm pregnant, so maybe I just like missed something. I was thinking about other things. At what point did she make an antidote, and did she take the antidote? Because suddenly they're just talking about it, and I feel like I missed it.
Yeah, I know. I know they were working on it, and that's when it like exploded.
That's
in
when
the
she
lab.
brought the like equipment from the
medical
hospital to their hideout.
And then that's all I remember after that, I don't remember her injecting herself with it or anything.
But I thought that she did.
Because when they have the conversation in the end, she's like, "Do you want it or not? Away all your stuff." Then he goes, I thought he said something like it sounded like the conversation implied she hadn't finished it. Like, but when it was finished, was she saying like it's done now, or like I'm still working on it?
I guess I was assuming. I think I assumed that she had finished it and maybe had even taken it, because at some point before that, Whistler had told her like, "You're going to become a vampire. Like, this is just happening to you." But then, as the movie's going on, she doesn't seem to have any like desire to drink blood.
Yeah.
So I think I just assumed that she was cured. But maybe that's just me assuming.
Although at the end of the movie, she would be, right, because he sucked her blood.
That's what I thought she let him, is because she's like, "I'm dead anyway."
Oh.
But I could be wrong. Maybe I don't know.
Dang it!
Is it a storytelling too economical that?
Yeah, maybe we could have used one more scene to discuss the serum. Um, but yeah, I do like that the vampires just start putting on sunblock and that's enough.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
like silly, but just not silly enough that I'm like, okay, I like it.
Yeah, it was funny.
That's got to be a high SPF though. I got to tell you.
Oh, the highest.
Yeah. They take out a high council member and they rip his fangs out and let the sun disintegrate him. That's cool.
Yep.
I say I wrote working on serum, so they are working on it. And that's when all the guys break in.
That's right.
So they did. She didn't finish.
She didn't finish it. Okay.
Remember, it blows up in his face. So
Yeah.
like that's one of the early things. And then so she's not sure if it'll work, but she does have a thing.
Yeah.
She's not entirely sure.
Okay.
And I guess she has enough of the test trial that's powerful enough that it can kill the bad guy at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that was different than the cure. That was I think she explained that it was just this thing that I forget. You inject someone with it and it does something to their blood. Therefore, it'll kill a vampire.
It's
because he made a comment and she's like, well, we're not using that for the serum.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Great. And okay. Once again, we figured it out. Let's see. Hallway people expanding and exploding into goop. What's that?
Well, that's when he injects them with that stuff.
Oh.
And it explodes them.
Another bad CGI moment where their faces blow up.
But also kind of fun.
Yeah, right.
like on a rewatch, because I do remember it was like from that moment on, with the first time I was watching it was like, oh woof, what are we doing?
I know, and now I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't bug me that much.
It's interesting that they did it.
Maybe it's that I'm braced, and I remembered the third act being like borderline unwatchable because of the special effects, and so I think with that expectation this time around, I'm like, oh, these are pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, and it is pre-Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I think there's some practical stuff they could have done, but
I've nailed it down. So,
here we go.
An anticoagulant formula known as EDTA, and that's what blows up when she says, "Look in there, but don't look," and it blows up the.
Yes.
That's what's in the blue vials that kills Frost at the end.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is different than what she ends up using in the actual serum that cures people.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. And because at the end he tells her to keep working on it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Got it. We're locked in. Thank you.
I guess because when he does suck her blood at that moment, and probably just more of me assuming and not really paying attention to the world. It's like, so a vampire can suck a vampire's blood, but maybe she's not a vampire yet. I don't know.
I think
I think she hadn't fully turned. Yeah, she hadn't fully turned. That's for sure.
That's got to be it.
Yeah.
But what we skipped when he does the blood sucking, what had just happened was that his mom showed up.
Yes.
Right. Which I forgot once again. But at first I felt like I wished that it hadn't been in the movie. But then as the movie progresses and they do kind of hit it and she, he's basically able to convince himself that it is not his actual mother. I think I did land on liking the inclusion of the mother coming back.
I think it's interesting. Especially like that, it's kind of like an Oedipus thing that you had mentioned too, which is interesting.
But at first glance, I was like, I don't like that they brought her back. But it does make sense too. You'd probably wonder that. And then when it revealed that Steven Dorff was the one that turned her, that's pretty interesting as well.
And I like what you had said earlier, Cutter, about how like a big part of his motive, Blades, is to avenge what happened to his mom, and then to find out that this is who his mom is. It is like, so what are you fighting for now? Yep. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that coupled with the sucking of the blood, do we have any other thoughts or comments on those two elements? What do we want to unpack or not unpack there?
Well, I mean, he doesn't. Well, I mean, the two things that are driving him. He doesn't see himself as a vampire, so like he doesn't drink human blood.
Right.
That's why he takes the serum, and then he wants to avenge his mom. And in that one scene, he drinks human blood and kills his mom.
Right.
Sort of like, so it's that it's kind of like the this was interesting that Goyer wrote The Dark Knight. It's a really similar kind of thing, like the superhero, not as, a purely moral, upright person, but is like constantly kind of breaking his or her own arbitrary standards in light of, the urgency of now, or what they'll tell themselves because they have to fight this like great good, and only they're the
Yeah.
ones to be responsible with it in the moment. So you get Bruce Wayne surveilling every human out there for the sake of this one time. So I think that's one of the interesting things of like the stuff that he's driven by in terms of his virtue are the very things that are the biggest threats to him, but then also apparently the things that he has to undo in order to defeat the enemy.
Yeah. That is I wonder if that theme is in more of his movies. But I'm blanking right now. I'm trying to think of like Batman versus Superman, which he's also a writer on. But
He
that
did.
movie's quite a mess, so that one might be harder to parse out. But
Well, I'd say it's definitely in The Dark Knight. Some Batman Begins. I've saw Dark City once years ago, so I can't remember that one. But
That one's so out there, I don't think it applies
yeah,
for my memory.
right.
But yeah.
But I do find that interesting. All the sort of like tortured souls, and it's kind of not when, but because again, this is early '90s, and I just don't. I should have looked this up. I didn't, but I don't recall a ton of superhero movies then at all.
Well, yeah, you'd have the the Reeves Superman movies were done by
Yeah,
now, and then you'd be in the Schumacher Batman
yeah,
during this time period.
yeah. So I grew up, yeah, and all the Michael Keaton as Batman, and then the like series of just ridiculousness
Yeah,
for that, and it was like, and they were all pretty clearly not not. I mean, they were dark characters, dark themes, but the character of Batman, from if I'm remembering those movies well, were upright. They were virtuous at their core.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
There were certain lines they wouldn't cross because
Right.
they were the good guy. And at this point, we get. I mean, this is '98, so then you get Matrix. It's kind of similar. So like, that's why it's interesting that the themes of like you can't trust. Part of the reason you can break those lines is because you literally can't trust who's on your side or not, because like this is an illusion. What's real is underground. And I feel like in Blade, there's even a few lines like that. Like,
Yeah.
you
yeah,
don't know what's going on above ground. Underground is reality. They're all among us. Anybody can be the good guy or the
Yes.
bad guy. You can't tell. So you got to shoot them all just to be sure.
right.
Then you get like Fight Club, like all of these movies that all of a sudden they become anti-heroes, really, the kind of superheroes do. Yeah, it'd be interesting to look at just through that kind of lens. And then, of course, though, what's unique here is that this is Marvel's franchise, though. So it's the Nolan Batman DC that gets sort of a little more dark and seedy, and Marvel goes the Iron Man route not too long after that. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's my
Yeah.
thematic read of killing your mom and sucking blood from the main lead woman.
And that's why we have you on this episode. That's great. Yeah, it is interesting that all these movies have this distrust element during this time period. I mean, you got to just wonder. There's a fear of technology coming. That's definitely hit on the Matrix. The turn of the century. We're through the excess of the '80s by this point. Yeah, maybe there's just a general nihilism amongst Americans that's like we can't trust anyone or anything anymore. And all these movies are kind of reflecting that.
Yeah.
Oh, man, weird, but makes for some great movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to say one of my favorite lines in the movie is when Donald Loesch says, "We're going to be gods. I'm going to be naughty, a naughty vampire god." That is a line in this movie.
He was a very interesting character I think he was so locked in.
Oh, I think well, he is one of our great character actors. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever not seen him like absolutely 100% locked into the movie.
No.
Even if the movie is not good, it's like, well, he's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing.
And so he's in What We Do in the Shadows, the show, as Donald Loge.
Yeah.
They have to have referenced this movie.
I'm sure they do. I just don't remember.
I would like to watch that.
I think you
again.
and I forgot he was in Blade, so we were like, "That's so random that they had this guy." And I think if we rewatched that,
yeah,
we'd be like, "Oh, duh."
Right.
Yeah.
So one thing I thought too, so we're in this last part of the movie. They're in this like underground, like really ancient things happening and an ancient ritual going on. Is this just underneath LA or did they transport this piece by piece and assemble it? It's like from what I don't know. I guess I don't know very much about LA, but it's like I kind of doubt vampires were like originated here.
I don't know,
but
man.
I've not read the comic
I don't
book.
know.
I don't know. I just thought that was kind of funny.
What is it? The Tom Petty song. How's it go? Is it Tom Petty? Where there's the vampires living in Rosita.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Free Fallen. It's Free Fallen. So maybe they did.
Yeah,
maybe
I guess there's a chance.
I mean, if Tom Petty said it, I mean, what are you gonna do? Deny Tom Petty?
Exactly.
When did John Carpenter's Vampires come out? Was that the 80s?
No, that was the 90s.
Okay. Because I was kind of thinking about that movie while watching this, because you and I watched it not that long ago, and that movie is
98. Same year.
Man, that movie is not great.
No,
I did not like that movie. And so because the aesthetics are somewhat similar. It's interesting because it's very different vampire movies and different vampire stories. That one definitely has the more religious route to it. But oh my gosh, that movie is not good.
No, well, and actually, this movie, August, September, October. So they weren't. This movie, Blade, came out in August, and that movie came out October 30th. Excuse me. Pretty
close together, though.
So probably everyone was like, "I got my fill of a vampire thing, and it was awesome. I don't want to see this."
That's a bummer.
I mean, unfortunately, Carpenter, one of my favorite directors, but he is one of those guys. And it happens to artists, and it's like an undefinable quality that he lost it.
Yeah.
Like he had it for, 20 or 2 decades, and then he just didn't have it anymore.
My story about John Carpenter is my PhD mentor, my theology PhD mentor, was working in like Western Kentucky University, doing whatever. And gets a call one day, and this is in late 70s, and it's John Carpenter, and and he's like, "I'm getting married, and I need a pastor to marry me." And Rob, my mentor's name, he's like, "Okay," and then he's like, "But the one thing I must happen is I don't want you to mention God at all," and my mentor's like, "Well, that's kind of like what I do." Like, why would you ask me to do it then if you don't want us to mention God at all? And he's like, "Well, you're my only option. You're the only people that can marry people." And he's like, "No, I'm not. I got a buddy down at the courthouse that can marry you tomorrow." And John Carpenter's like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's the judge will marry you." And like, "Oh, great, thanks so much." And then he went and got married by the judge. I'm like, "Wait, what?" I'm like, "Rob." And I was like, no. I'm like, that's when you just say, "Okay, I'll marry." So like, how bizarre of a world that John Carpenter called up my now close friend and said, "Would you marry?" And he said no.
There's almost kind of like, I mean, that's not great, but like a sweet naivety about it, where it's like, I need a man of faith to do this, but it can't be a faith-based thing.
Yeah. He just thought. I'm like, all right, that's pretty funny. So
wow, that's incredible. That's worth the price of this episode alone, which is just downloading it.
You should you should actually, if you want, talk to Rob Johnston. So I've co-written books with him. He's done stuff in film for so he's kind of the father of sort of theology in film stuff.
We got to have him on. I'd love to have him on.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. So back to Blade though. They get this whole machine running. They use Blade's blood, and then they're able to awaken the Magra god.
Sure.
And
the fact that he was in the womb of a person who was bitten by a vampire and became a vampire is like why he's so special.
Yeah, that's why he's a daywalker.
Okay. That's why they needed his blood.
And so this like kills the council members. They fly away in skeleton bat form.
Yeah.
And then Steven Dorff's like, let's get down.
I do wish that that Deacon could have kind of like become something that looked cooler. If he was personifying the god.
Yeah.
He had bloody eyes.
Yeah.
I do think because of the way the movie was going effects wise, if they did do something, it would be really tough to watch now.
I agree. So, I think what I couldn't tell are the flying vampire skull bats trying to kill him, or are they like empowering him? Like, was that part of how he became the god?
I felt like he was like consuming their power. Yeah, is how I read it.
That's what I. So yeah, so they fly around. He kind of gobbles them all up in a way.
Yeah,
very easy way. And the one blonde hair or platinum hair, she sneaks off. She's like, "Oh, I'm out here."
Right.
And she meets an untimely end, or pretty quickly, with the callback of the garlic mace.
Yeah.
So yes. It works once. Then we get the epic battle.
Yeah. And before that, Blade also kills everybody in a very fun sequence of martial arts. But yeah, then they fight, and as they're fighting, it is very cool, and I think this speaks to like Snipes' acting ability here in this action persona where he's done so good at holding these poses.
Yeah.
And being so perfectly cheesy. He's the right amount that then he attacks Deacon and does it in such a way that it's like a for sure kill, and he's not even looking toward him, and he's posed perfectly. And then he starts sucking back together.
Yeah.
And then he looks, and it's like the only time that he looks like he doesn't know what's going on or what to do.
Yeah.
Perfect moment.
Yeah.
Love that.
Really
Love that moment. But then, of course, we fight for just a little bit, and I love how mercifully short the fight is. Sometimes these like intimate fights take so long when you've already seen the coolest parts of movies.
Yes.
But the explosive thing, the
EDH or something or other.
Yeah.
Coagulant.
Yeah.
Coagulant.
Or non-coagulant, something like that.
It's stuck in this crevice, and he throws his sword at it, and it seemingly misses. But the sword has an automatic like blade that comes out and rips off your hand if anyone tries to use it and does it incorrectly, which causes it to fall. He catches it behind his back, and then he just hits him with all four, and it makes him explode.
Mm-hmm. Pretty great.
And it's like, boom, done.
That's it.
And we just watched all the Dirty Harry movies.
And what was the line he said? Some mother effers.
We're all some mother effers always trying to ice skate uphill.
So good.
At which point he then does like a roundhouse kick for the last serum thing into his chest. Like that's totally unnecessary. Instead of just throwing it, he does a kick.
It's so good. I got to start using that in life. I really got to start living by that motto. But we just recently went through all of the Dirty Harry movies for our podcast, and we've watched this movie, and I think it's time, folks, for at least every 1 out of 5 movies to just get to your ending within 3 minutes of the last scene instead of a 20-minute conclusion. Because oh boy, it's so nice when a movie just is sky shot, crane, characters are moving on, let's go.
She's like, so do you want to take the serum now that you've finished this? And he's like, there's still work to be done. Moscow.
Yeah.
Continuing his work.
And then they kind of it's like a replicate the opening scene.
Yeah.
Where this guy is taking a girl this time to some place, and then he starts attacking, and then Blade's like there, pulls out his blade, cuts to black.
Yep.
That's all we need sometimes.
Oh yeah, I love it.
I do want to. Oh, go ahead.
Good setup. It's a good setup for Blade 2. So
yeah, it made me want to put it in right away.
Mm-hmm. Same.
But yeah, and I do want to mention there was an alternate ending.
Oh.
And I did watch it where after they have that little conversation, the camera turns and you see a vampire out in the distance, played by the director of the movie. You just see his outline, but it is none other than Dr. Michael Morbius from Marvel Comics.
Oh.
And she says something like, "Well, you better get to work." And then it cut to black.
He's a bad guy?
Well,
or he's like another anti-hero?
He's an anti-hero.
Yeah, I think in the comics he meets Blade early on and like either helps him become Blade. There's some connection to that character and Blade in particular that is allows him to become Blade either through training, like either gives him martial arts training, or he part of how he slightly infects him or something. So
okay. That would make sense. Yeah, I only know him through the lens of Spider-Man and Spider-Man comics, and I always feel like he's misplaced anytime he's in an issue. Not every time. There's a couple of good things, but he premiered in Spider-Man, and he's like a Spider-Man bad guy. But he's sometimes
evolved.
It's kind of like a Fast and Furious thing. It's like everybody's family at the end of the day. Depends on which issue you're pulling up.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's Blade.
Yeah.
It's awesome. If you haven't watched it, listener, watch it.
And then listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't listen to the podcast first.
No.
We just spoiled it all. Yeah,
if you are one of those weird people that starts the episode and then skips to the very end to see what we say and then go back to the beginning, watch it. Kutter, do you have anything else to say about this movie that we didn't cover?
No, just it's fun. It's nostalgic. It's a lot of like really solid parts of it, and if you can just set aside the couple CG moments. I think on the whole it holds up, and it was fun. And yeah, to say we had a black lead of a MCU franchise as as the first one, really, other than Howard the Duck. It's pretty interesting, pretty groundbreaking in ways that I don't think it was recognized at the time. So
right,
yeah. I got nothing else to say about the movie. You, Jordan?
No, it's cool.
Well, take the floor, Kutter. Plug away. What do you have to plug?
Well, all I have to plug is actually maybe there's a couple things. One, depending upon when this comes out, hopefully the first week of October, we're gonna, if you're in the Pasadena area, we are gonna have a horror sort of conference. People in the industry that are working, we'll have some directors, some writers, and then some on-screen talent sort of workshops. We'll have a couple screenings of soon to be released movies, some that are coming out this October, and some conversations with those. So just check out Brim Film if you're interested in joining us for that. Other thing, our podcast is coming out, Be Afraid, so check that out. I'm hosting. My name's Kutter. And then for those of you who are of the religious persuasion, hopefully at that same time, we will have what we are calling a horror devotional, which is essentially a series of devotional readings from the biblical text that are themselves in the horror genre. And we're kind of putting them together with other kind of horror films in terms of shedding light on some of these stories that are pretty tragic and grotesque and traumatic, and asking why would we want to reflect on those and meditate on those. So more info on that'll come out, but that'll be the other thing to check out, the other thing to cross promote.
Very cool.
It sounds like you wrote a book for Jordan.
Yeah, a devotional for me.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Don't forget to... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and congratulations in advance on the impending arrival
Yes.
Thank you.
of a new macaw.
By the time this comes out, hopefully we're
be-
like masters at this whole parenting thing.
You'll be writing a book on how other people should parent. So.
Right. Isn't that how it works? You master the parenting skill, and it gets easier, right, as they get older.
Quickly. It only gets easier.
Well, thank you for coming on. Don't forget to rate and review our podcast and sign up for Patreon for bonus episodes. All the links are in the notes, including what Kutter has mentioned. I will put in the episode notes to the show. So next week is Blade 2.
Play
Cool.
two.
All right. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.